Okay, I think we'll go back to the order in which was posted at this point, which would leave us with going back to Senator Sheehan's 2408. Senator Sheehan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, members of the committee. I have a statement to read, Chairman, if I could please. My bill, Senate Bill 2408, will prohibit the use of maintenance and certification as a basis for physician licensure, hospital employment, or credentialing, or health plan reimbursement or credentialing. Maintenance certification means a continuing education program measuring core competencies in the practice of medicine and surgery and approved by a nationally recognized accrediting organization. This bill does not limit the use of initial board certification for licensure or credentialing, nor is it in any way a statement in support of less learning by physicians or reduced quality of care. Far from it. Maintenance of certification requirements on board certified physicians are called briefly MOC, Maintenance and Certification, LOC. MOC is comprised of computer modules, formal testing, and other activities that have little or no perceived value with respect to quality improvement or competency among the provider community. I think Senator Sackey can relate to some of the testing stuff as teachers. There are no independent medical studies or evidence demonstrating the value of MOC in terms of improved patient outcomes. That's important. There's no evidence showing that having maintenance certification is extra additional requirements improves patient outcomes. Instead, it is, however, overly burdensome, costs physicians thousands of dollars, and ironically requires significant time away from practicing medicine and caring for patients. The MOC program generates, however, considerable cost and puts unreasonable demands on a physician's time with questionable value. The MOC is a trademark program and is dominated by one large player called the American Board of Medical Specialties, and I believe there is a lobbyist that came to Rhode Island to testify today. Welcome, Rhode Island. Senate Bill 2408 will put a stop to the growing practice of insurers and hospitals requiring MOC as a basis for credentialing or employment until more studies are done to weigh its impact on clinical and economic outcomes against the high costs required by MOC. I submitted this bill on behalf of the rank and file doctors, some of them who are here today. They are far from alone. Indeed, the American Medical Association itself, AMA, also opposes MOC on behalf of its members. Senate Bill 2408 is model legislation, frankly, that was drafted from the AMA legislation that is circulating nationally. Last year, we heard a bill in support of the MOC, actually it was an interstate compact. The argument by proponents of MOC was that physicians would not be required, would not in any way be required, to join the MOC, which is administered by the American Board of Medical Specialties. Remember that, right, Betty? Remember this whole argument. This bill does exactly that, but does so in words, not just in words, but in fact. I request the committee's favorable consideration of Senate Bill 2408, which will give a bona fide choice to doctors as to whether or not they want to join the MOC or not. Last year, again, to be clear, we were told over and over again there was going to be no legislation not to require doctors to do this, yet there are hospitals and other groups that are requiring of doctors. So we want to continue the choice again. The additional burden has nothing to do with basic licensure and other educational requirements. It is, however, a program that is administered by a large player, nationally called the American Board of Medical Specialties. With that, any questions?
So I just want to be clear on one thing. I'm trying to find the bill. It's wrapped up in here with other stuff, but there's one conversation that's going on that's interstate based on the compact, and there's another conversation that's going on about facilities within the state of Rhode Island. And so does the legislation approach one or both of those issues?
It would not prevent the prohibit an interstate compact. In fact,
Okay.
The MOC program, or
Yeah.
the MOC program, that would be their choice, and it would not in any way adversely impact an interstate
Yep.
compact.
Yep.
That I'm aware of.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Sheehan, I noticed in the description of the bill and then upon further examination of the bill that it seemingly only refers to osteopathic certification. Okay.
So
Thank you.
But it wouldn't refer to all doctors.
Any other questions for Senator Sheehan? So, there are several people signed up letter only, and I'm going to go just, if this is inaccurate because it says letter only next to your name, you can tell me, but just so I can get the list narrowed a little bit, I'm going to go through those. If I can read the names, because they are doctors writing these names. Dr. Faridon Kalan, Dr. Wojek Fachin, Mohammed Ari, Grigston Yarwood, Gern Lemp, Fadi Bilbisi, Bruce Nevis. They seem to be in support. It's written on the back of a witness sheet, so I assume that's what it is. Okay. Daniel Schulter, Michael Monjour, DeRobio, Atlaf Gritch, Phil Phillips, I think I got all the letter ones. Renowned Physicians Quality Care, Saul Levin, Emily Murphy, so now I'm going to try to go to the people that may actually be here based on the way their names are entered. Steve DeToy from the Medical Society.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
just about 10 minutes ago, I'm still Steve DeToy from the Medical Society. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Sheehan, as my former senator, and out of all due respect to you, I think there were some issues with your statement that I will leave for the representative from the American Board of Medical Specialty. My purpose today is to clearly state for this committee and everyone in the room, once again, the position of the Rhode Island Medical Society on this legislation. So please, from my voice to your ears. So first of all, Section 1 would prohibit the Department of Health via this legislature, because the legislature sets the requirements for licensure, from requiring maintenance of certification as a condition of licensure. That is a solution in search of a problem. It's not happened any of the 70 other or 69 other licensing entities in the country, and has never been mentioned, and I attend all the Board of Medical Licensure and Discipline hearings that I can, or meetings that I can, so to that extent, we leave that discretion up to this committee on what to do with that. We take no position there. Section 2, well, the language has changed a little bit, and let me go back to Senator Sheehan's statement. He's absolutely correct. The American Medical Association does have model language based on some policy that passed about a year or two ago. They also have, and the relationship between the Rhode Island Medical Society and the AMA is one that we have delegates that vote on their policies through their House of Delegates based on how many AMA members are actually in Rhode Island. So our delegates did not support those, that resolution that drafted that model legislation. We are not required to prescribe to the AMA positions. We do so often on the discretion of our leadership based on whatever issue you may bring before you. If we haven't seen it before, first thing we will do is check with the AMA policy manual and see if there's policy, or check with other medical specialties. The AMA does also have a much longer standing policy on the issue in Section 2 of this bill, which is hospital medical privileges. And that is the one that our leadership is most concerned with. I'm just going to read for a second so that we all understand what hospital medical staffs are. The organized medical staff and the hospital governing body are responsible for the provision of quality care, providing a safe environment for patients, staff, and visitors, and working continuously to improve patient care and outcomes with the primary responsibility for the quality of the care rendered and for patient safety vested with the physicians or organized medical staff. These activities depend on mutual accountability, interdependence, and responsibility of the organized medical staff and the hospital governing board. The organized medical staff is self-governing organization, self-governing, possessing special expertise, knowledge, and training, discharges certain inherent professional responsibilities by virtue of its authority to regulate the professional practice and standards of its members, and assumes primary responsibility for many functions, including but not limited to the determination of organized medical staff membership, performance by credentialing, privileging, and other peer review and timely oversight of clinical quality safety. The independence of our hospital medical staffs is at the core of the care that's delivered in hospitals. I believe you have a letter from Lifespan to this occasion here. I also brought a letter from Dr. Adam Kepfeld from the American College of Surgeons. When I look at the language in Section 2, line 5 on page 2, is admitting privileges based solely on the physician's decision to participate. We would agree with that. Nothing should be based solely on one item. What we're objecting to, and please let me be clear, is that the General Assembly should not be telling licensed or hospital medical staffs how to conduct the business of the hospital medical staff. Every medical staff that I'm aware of has exemptions. They have policies that are all decided by the members of that hospital medical staff. Some involve credentialing, some involve education, some involve where your car gets to be parked. But those are all independent decisions by that hospital medical staff. It's a very democratic organization. It is not controlled by the administration of the hospital. It's controlled by the physicians and other medical professionals. Could be podiatrists or dentists or other professionals who have admitting privileges or privileges at the hospital. So we think that that's already taking place. We just have a really big problem having the legislature interfere in that. Section 3 deals with whether or not insurance companies can use, and again, using the terminology based solely on that. And I've had some conversations with the insurance companies. I'm not going to characterize their concerns. That's up to them to be here. And it's up to my colleague from the American Board of Medical Specialty to discuss some of the issues that you raised earlier. So that is our position. And I would be happy to answer any questions.
Senator Sheehan?
Steve, respect this
Former.
You indicated there was something in my testimony that was sleight of hand fashion.
I didn't say sleight of hand. I said that, yeah. Well,
That's the way I read it. I just wanted to inform you before I get your question, that my testimony warrant a sentence talking about a particular company, the American Board of Medical Specialties, and that they making money on the block. It was all from your colleague in Massachusetts, his testimony given in legislation in Massachusetts. I think that was a fair representation.
and I didn't say it wasn't a fair representation of where you got it. Yep. That's why I thought I would leave it to them. Something rang hollow. I don't remember your entire discussion, Senator, with all due respect.
And of course, you did indicate that there is a National Assembly of, state members of the Medical Association that meet to vote on resolutions.
That's the American Medical Association, yep.
So the American Medical Association members, their delegates.
Yep. Yep.
Around the nation.
Yep.
Was it a majority vote that approved of opposing the law?
That's how most democracy works, yep, a majority. I don't know what the numbers were, but clearly it was enough, more voted for it than voted against it.
So my question to you is, why is Rhode Island oppose it, whereas a number of states, certainly, I would imagine, maybe majority dollars of representatives, not just doctors, but
Right.
representatives of the medical community,
Mhm.
through this association oppose it.
Yep.
Where's Rhode Island different, and are you evaluating yourself as a
No, I'm not a physician.
Where do they differ?
We differ in this because it deals with hospital medical staff. No state that I'm aware of has passed language dealing with the independence of hospital medical staffs. Many have passed the MOC, MOL, which we've said we're okay with. The insurance company one, I'll leave that up to them because they're the insurance companies. I'm talking solely about independent hospital medical staff associations and that language. And please remember, I said I didn't have a problem with the language. It's whether or not the General Assembly should be passing a law to tell them how to run their practice.
Jim, this basically gives choice, and if you're saying this is legislation, you indicated, I'm paraphrasing you, correct me if I'm wrong, that this is legislation that serves a problem. If there's not a problem, then...
No. The Section 1 is what I was referring to, if I wasn't clear, which is the maintenance of certification for licensure. That's Section 1 of your bill. That's the one that I said was a solution looking for a problem, which we have no problem if you want to pass that, because this legislature properly sets licensing standards.
The last question,
Yep.
Mr. Chairman. Is the mock required by any organization, entity, corporation, subdivision of corporation in the state of Rhode Island? Any authorized entity that's in charge in the state of Rhode Island?
I couldn't tell you. The hospital medical staffs, I don't believe, are legally chartered as a corporation or anything like that. I don't know about health insurers. That would be probably the two areas, because board certification is part of a credentialing process. It shows that you've done your training, you've done your residency, you've been in practice, you're eligible to take your board exam, and that you then have attained a higher level, and that's usually the maximum level that any physician can attain. What you're talking about, Senator, is not board certification. You're talking about a process. So when board certification first came around, and I kind of remember this, is how long I've been here, a physician would sit for a test 1 or 2 or 3 days, depending on the specialty, and each specialty sets their own criteria. You pass that test, you're board certified. Some board certifications were for 7 years before you had to do the test again. Some board certifications were for 10 years before you did it again. Some were actually good for life. And so there are still some physicians around who were grandfathered in under the life of board certification. The maintenance of certification, and again, I'm stepping on the process, or the toes of Charlie here, is what happens between those testing periods and how you maintain your skill set, your continuing education, and other processes. Each board has set up a different policy for that. I'm looking at you, Charlie. If I say something wrong, correct me now. Yeah, that would be better put to him, I think. No, they would require board certification. It's kind of cutting a hair a little, but if you have a board certification, when you apply for medical staff privileges, they would, if that's a requirement, it's when you walk in the door. Now, if board certification.
Wind up a little bit.
Board certification. Now, if you choose to allow that board certification to lapse, if you're one of the ones that has time-referenced ones, or you are unable to continue with your board certification, your privileges may be in jeopardy depending on the bylaws of that independent hospital medical association. Every hospital has their own medical staff, and those bylaws aren't available to me.
My committee members to maintain the privileges of the hospital, it sounds like it is required. Not only to keep your licensure, if you have privileges there, but you have to involve yourself in maintenance certification, which to me is splitting hairs because it doesn't require that. And this just gives people a choice.
But it wouldn't say in the bylaws you have to be in a maintenance or certification program. It only would say you, no. It wouldn't say that. It would say you have to be board certified. How you keep your board certification is really between you and your medical specialty.
So, to be clear on that, some medical specialties may use MOC to do that and some may not.
I think most of them are using some variation of a ongoing program.
Yeah.
Some medical specialties, hasn't been an issue. There have been other medical specialties where it became a huge issue and led to some of the discussions at the AMA that led to that AMA policy.
Okay.
So there's 26 or 27 boards, 24. They all do it differently.
Okay.
So,
And which Senator Sheehan, because this was kind of a question to both of you. The main two components of I have read, that the ability to practice in a facility should not be denied solely, is one of the key words in here, due to their participation in MOC, and that an insurer cannot vary their reimbursement solely based on their MOC. Do we know whether there's, and maybe some of the people who are going to sign up and testify, but do we know if there's occurrences of this?
of which one?
Oh, either one.
I know that our legislative chair had a physician that he had hired to join his practice at Rhode Island Hospital. The physician was not board certified. It wasn't eligible for board certification, but they made an exemption and allowed him to join. Now, are there occasions where you might lose your hospital medical staff privileges if you're no longer board certified? I'm sure that's probably happened.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr.
Just don't know how many times.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
Lisa Frappier?
Mr. Chairman, in the interest of time, I'm just going to let my written testimony.
Okay. Michael Silver?
Hi, I'm Dr. Michael Silver. I'm a psychiatrist. I happen to be the chief medical officer of the Providence Center, but I'm here representing the Rhode Island Psychiatric Society, which strongly supports this bill. I am board certified, and I am grandfathered in this whole process. I do not have to do maintenance of certification. This doesn't affect me at all. I have no skin in the game whatsoever. So why am I here? I'm basically here because I hate getting ripped off, I hate wasting time, and I hate to see this happening to my colleagues, which is exactly what is going on. As was stated, this legislation is model legislation from the American Medical Association. I'm a member of the Medical Society, and I'm disappointed that the leadership took that stance, but clearly this is what the American Medical Society has listed as model legislation. All that talk about other stuff, blah, 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 is not where they stand. It was done in a democratic fashion, and we have actually polled doctors in Rhode Island. They support this legislation. Clearly, the leadership of the Medical Society doesn't, but I don't think that represents the vast groups of psychiatrists in Rhode Island.
Psychiatrists. Vast group of
I
psychiatrists.
mean, of doctors, I'm
Okay.
sorry. Sorry, I'm too thinking of myself. And clearly, this is not the way to improve quality care. I mean, what does improve quality of care? Center for Medicare Services, insurance companies, they look at outcomes. And they're tying outcomes to money. And I'm on Care New England Quality Board, and see what happens. Those are the kind of things that you need to do to improve quality care in Rhode Island, and it is happening. Having people do this other stuff and take tests, not so much, and no study has showed that it has any value whatsoever. The last issue that I want to talk about, and I think the most important issue, is recruitment and retention of doctors in Rhode Island. It is difficult. You'll ask anybody. It is hard to recruit doctors here. The salaries here are significantly less than in other states. Massachusetts has this very same bill, which is being presented to the legislature. The Massachusetts Medical Society is in support of the bill. There's a reasonable chance that that bill will pass in Massachusetts. Now, what would happen if that happens? That's a further disincentive for doctors to stay in Rhode Island. They can go to Massachusetts, make more money. They don't have to deal with all this hassle of coming up with all this arbitrary things, and we stand to lose doctors. Now, I would suggest that we be proactive with this and not wait 5 to 10 years when everyone starts screaming, it's a crisis, we can't hire doctors, the hospitals can't hire doctors because they want to go somewhere else where there are less stringent requirements. I would suggest that now would be the time to act on this. Thank you.
Any questions for Dr. Silver? Senator Satchel.
Thank you, Dr. Silver. So, when you had meant to say a large group of doctors, but you said a large group of psychiatrists. And
Right.
I'm sitting here, and to be quite honest, I'm wondering if it was a Freudian slip, because it seems like, in reading Dr. Frappier's testimony, it says that the ABMS has a monopoly in some settings. Does this seem to be more of an issue in psychiatry, or is this an issue in all settings?
No, it's not more of an issue. It's just that one of the people behind it happened to be a psychiatrist. But the real issue became in internal medicine because there was questions, legal questions. There have been investigations about that board and the amount of money they were collecting, et cetera, et cetera. So the impetus came from internal medicine. Psychiatry, like most other specialties, are pretty much along for the ride.
So just to be clear, and seeing as you're one of the first people to testify, for those of us who aren't doctors, the maintenance of certificate process that we're talking about in this legislation, can you give us examples of how expensive or inexpensive that is? Or you say your grandfathered in, should I ask somebody else?
I don't know the exact dollars, but I know it's thousands of dollars
Per year?
At least every 3 years. Someone else could probably answer that because I don't actually have to do it.
Okay.
But it's thousands of dollars.
I'll let somebody else follow up.
Right. I don't want to give inaccurate information.
But there are doctors like you or psychiatrists like you that are grandfathered in?
Well, because when they started this process, we were board certified for life, so they
allowed that to be.
Anyone who got board certification after, 2000, then they only had it for a period of time. We had it. That's why we're grandfathered.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Thank you. Dr. Howard Schulman.
Thank you for this opportunity to testify, Chair Miller, Vice Chair Golden. Actually, Steve DeToy's here also. It's an honor to appear before you. I'm here to testify. I'm a general internist, an internist in internal medicine for about 25 years in Rhode Island. I'm here to testify against the maintenance of certification process, but let me be clear. I'm not arguing against...
That means you're in favor of the legislation?
I'm against maintenance of certification. I'm in favor of the legislation.
Okay, yeah.
And I'm not arguing against this initial certification, which a trainee takes at the end of their clinical training and before entering the workforce. But I am arguing against the new every 2-year process that was started in 2014. Under the so-called maintenance and certification rules, as opposed to the initial certification, physicians have to participate in an extremely time-consuming and poorly designed number of exercises designed by a national credential committee. If I felt the exercises were excellent and they were worthwhile, I would not be quite as upset. But the exercises were silly and outdated and just poorly done. And frankly, after 3 years of nationwide physician revolt, including the formation of an entirely new national certifying board to challenge the traditional board, they backed down and rescinded some of these exercises. But having gone through the process in its entirety, I totally lost trust and faith in this group. Unfortunately, this group is planning on rolling out a new set of requirements which only has deepened my resentment towards them. As part of my recertification, which I did about 3-4 years ago, here's a pile of 35 surveys that I had to submit to patients. Each one has 51 questions in it, asking my patients to give all sorts of private questions about how my practice was going. 35 surveys. It took a long time to get that done. And then I had to come up with a plan to improve these scores that I got and give another 35 questionnaires out, each with 50 questions. I had to force patients to convince them to do these surveys so I could get certified. Each has 51 questions on it about how my practice was going. Keep in mind that these surveys weren't designed with me in mind, and they weren't being done at my request, but with the intention of improving my practice or addressing a problem that I need to work on, but some outside organization. The most galling aspect of the whole certification process, I was forced to give permission for the certifying organization to use the results of my survey responses. This is a document that I copied at the time, about 3 or 4 years ago, that I signed in the computer. And it's called Enroll in the Maintenance and Certification Program, Consent to Release Information, Agreement to Conditions, and Signature. And it's just Facebook all over, you know? But we were forced to do these surveys. It's not like you're free to do it. And you know, Facebook, you kind of know that it's like you're putting your information out there. In order to get recertified and to work, I had to give these patients the surveys, and then I had to sign this form saying that Facebook or ABMS would have my information and can use it. Keep in mind that each questionnaire had 51 questions on it, taking a considerable amount of time for the patients to complete, which I had to ensure that they completed, which took a lot of effort on my part. Additionally, these results had to be entered in the certifying board's poorly designed and time-consuming website. In order to ensure that the questionnaires got submitted and I got my certification, I decided to enter the survey results myself. I found that after I got good at navigating their website, that it took an average of 6 minutes to enter each survey. That's going, I practiced, I'm good at computers, and if you multiply 6 minutes times 70 surveys, there was a total of 7 hours for me just to enter the survey results in the computer. Additionally, for the certification process, I had to take something like 90 hours of online fill-in-the-blank testing, 90 hours of sitting in front of a computer. Lastly, there was an all-day fill-in-the-blank computer test in a secure facility, all day. Medicine, like being a state legislator, is not a fill-in-the-blank profession. The surveys were eventually discontinued, as I mentioned, after 3 years of national physician protest, articles in the Wall Street Journal, in Newsweek, but the memory of this whole process just gives me heartburn.
So you said the process that you just showed us no longer exists?
This particular one, they're coming up with a new process.
So the 50-patient questionnaire no longer exists, and the day-long?
The day-long does exist.
No
the
longer
computer
exists?
fill-in-the-blanks will still exist. They're recalibrating it. I'm not sure what they're going to come up with.
Right. But so the two things that you just demonstrated with the survey.
The survey in particular.
The survey doesn't exist anymore.
Correct.
The day-long secure
I believe
facility.
they canceled that and a lot of other things. But for 3 years, there was physician protest and just ignored us.
Okay.
The Wall Street Journal had articles about it. Newsweek, all the medical journals were arguing about this, that physicians are up in arms, and they just ignored us. That's the type of people they were.
Okay.
And they
but
made me
just
sign
to-
this release over here.
Just to be clear.
Yeah.
Okay. So what you Up until you said it no longer exists, that was very dramatic testimony where you showed us a questionnaire and you showed us a day-long lock-in where you had to fill out.
That still exists, the day-long lock-in and the 90 hours. I don't know if it's 90 or 70. That's a lot of time
We
sitting
just
in
want
front
to
of a
be
computer.
clear on what we're talking about that exists and no longer exists.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Dear Senators, the life of a physician these days
Yeah.
is getting more and more frustrating and less rewarding. In a recent Go Local Providence article, Rhode Island was listed as 49 out of 50 as the worst place to be a physician in the United States. Additionally, in large part due to the demands of having to spend inordinate amounts of time filling in the blanks on a computer screen and type notes, and also all the other outside demands on physicians these days, there has developed a whole wealth of articles focusing on physician burnout, as if this was a problem or something wrong with individual doctors, and not something that there was a problem with the environment that we're working in. I see this MOC, maintenance and certification, issue as just one more straw on the camel's back, so I decided to do something about it. And to my surprise, I discovered that there is a network of physicians across the nation of similar state of mind coalescing and saying that we're sick and tired of being abused and that we don't want to take it anymore. Keep in mind that you should regard seeing a bunch of doctors in front of you as something unusual. Most docs are dedicated to helping sick people get the best care the healthcare system can provide, and it takes an extraordinary circumstance to get us into this building. We are not lobbyists. We do not get paid to be here. We are fighting for our quality of life. We're not quibbling with the initial certification, but keep in mind that after a physician leaves training and enters the workforce, every single word that he or she utters or order that he or she makes is fully open to criticism and review. And while every so often we read about physicians who are doing bad things, there are so many ways we can get caught that bad apples don't last for too long. The Department of Health has a website that invites patients to complain about their physicians. They also conduct investigations if they hear about bad practice. There are numerous malpractice attorneys that make millions of dollars discovering and proving physician malpractice, and these lawyers spend millions of dollars advertising that patients can get money as a result of malpractice, which tends to bring these cases to daylight. Hospitals have credentialing committees and numerous specialty departments to ensure that the staff members practice appropriate medicine, and the whole hospital takes a publicity hit if one of their doctors screws up. Insurance companies and Medicare and Medicaid, armed with reams of spending pattern data and forever concerned about the health of their insured customers, also have huge incentives to detect poorly performing physicians. I'm almost done. The newspapers and the media have incentives to publish stories about physicians gone bad. It's usually a headline when these stories get published. It's great for sales to find out about these stories about physicians doing bad things. I worked with a physician who, when he subsequently got old and likely suffered from dementia, got reported by other physicians. Also, if a doc gets a bad reputation, patients hear about it and don't go to him or her. And additionally, other docs don't refer to that physician. Docs already have a significant requirement for continuing medical education for relicensing here in the state of Rhode Island every 2 years. I think it's like 40 hours for every 2 years. I personally wouldn't have, I do much, much more than that. I wouldn't have a problem if you were so concerned about it to increase that to maybe 50 hours. But I think it's best to leave this alone and allow docs to pick the topics that interest them and pertain to local and personal interests instead of having some national organization dictate this. A truly rewarding aspect of medicine that I and most of my colleagues personally still find rewarding is that we can go home after a stressful day in the office and read up in the peace of our own private homes on an unusual patient's condition or some other topic that we're interested in. I feel that this new maintenance of certification requirement is just one more drain on my time and emotional strength that takes away from this enjoyment. I think you would all agree that the great majority of docs are hardworking, dedicated, and self-motivated professionals, and treating us like irresponsible babies serves nobody. Lastly, I just want to show you a couple. These are from a website from the American Board of Medical Specialties. This is the incoming president of the Medical Society. He actually initially certified he's not participating in maintenance of certification. He was probably grandfathered, but they still recommend people do maintenance of certification even if you're grandfathered. So evidently the Medical Society didn't feel that the next incoming president had to be maintenance of certification. This is Dr. Michael Fine. I have a huge amount of respect for Dr. Fine. He was the previous director of the Department of Health, and he was initially certified. And he didn't feel, and he's still around, he's doing great things. I think he's a patient advocate. He didn't feel that it was worthwhile becoming certified, maintenance certification. And this is the head of the Federation of State Board Medical Services or Society. And
Yeah.
all the different state medical boards are under his aegis. And he never was even certified in the first place, and he's not engaging in maintenance of
Yeah,
certification.
so Dr. Holman is a constituent of mine. I do have a relationship with him, so I can go talk to him about that.
I think he should, if he wants to advocate at the Department of Medical Society, I think he should go ahead and become do maintenance of certification. Yes.
Okay. Any questions? Senator Calkin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I actually have a couple of questions. On the surveys that you had to ask your patients to fill out, the 70 of them, does that have patient information as well? Like, I guess I'm thinking like HIPAA, right? I mean, you want privacy. Is this company that's getting this information have patient information?
I'm sure they did the appropriate legal releases, or it was sort of de-identified when it was entered in the computer. But never, it's personal information about what they thought about me, and they own that information. So Facebook owns 70 surveys from me. Facebook owns it.
Okay, and then I guess the second question I have is, with them collecting thousands of dollars from every physician,
Yeah.
what do they do with that money?
They've got hundreds of millions of dollars. I don't know what they're doing with it. I mean, I'm not sure.
Okay, thank you.
There's a lot of money in the bank, though, and we know that. There was a scandal about buying some condominiums
So
for
they're
millions
not-
of dollars. But, I mean, it's to some extent they're trying to improve their product. They're trying to promote their product. They do a lot of sponsoring. They're like sponsoring things like, they want to get their name out there. They're promoting a brand. They want to take over the certification process and quality. And instead of like allowing physicians to do it, I think they want to sort of be the branded sort of like, we're going to stamp you as certified. And doctors are going to be obliged to pay for that. So they want to build a wall and make us pay for it.
So, but the physicians themselves aren't getting something back for that?
No, we pay for it.
Okay.
I think it's like $2,000 every 10 years, but a lot of the exercises
So-
every 2 years we have to pay for, and it's,
So the certification takes place, the MOC that we're talking about takes place every 10 years?
there's a major big test, a full-day test, and there's also every 2 years, there's other exercises that you have to do as well.
But
They're
the
actually,
the fee and the test that you were talking about that includes patients takes place every 10 years?
there's one major, I think they have there's two different ways that they can make, there's three different ways. One is they're licensing the ability to qualify for maintenance of certification to other organizations so that they can offer a test and say that it's maintenance of certification points. They collect on that. They make money by offering tests that give you credit for maintenance
The fee that's over
certification.
$2,000 and the test that includes customer surveys takes place every 10 years?
That one big test every 10 years.
And the one major fee is every 10 years?
But and also to get the credits for the maintenance certification every 2 years, you have to pay for those courses as well.
Yeah.
And that's
Any
sort of-
idea what those fees are?
They're hundreds of dollars. I mean, if you add it all up, I mean, it's
But the
probably thousands of dollars.
The over 2,000 and the comprehensive exam happens every 10 years?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Senator Crowley?
Just one question.
Yeah.
You were speaking that you're talking about 90 hours of doing this exam or what have you. Is there a time constraint? Do you have to get it done in such a...
Well, by like every 2 years, you have to do a certain number of testing, but like every 10 years, you have to get a bigger
So it's over
amount.
a period of time that the 90 hours comes in, is that it?
Yeah, it's not, I think you have to do it within a year of the timeline. Like within 10 years, you have to you can't do it like a little bit all the time. I think you have to do it with like within a year of that deadline, you have to get like 70 hours of, I had to get for like 2 months in order to get the deadline, because in like 2014, my certification was running out. For 2 months, literally, I'd go home and I'd be online, typing on the computer and filling in the blanks. It was just exhausting. It was 2 months of doing that. 70 hours, I think 70 or 90 hours, just fill in the blanks. I mean, can you imagine like some national legislative organization telling you guys you'd have to spend like 70 hours on the computer filling in the blanks on how to be a good legislator?
Not on my life, but thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
So as I call other people who want to testify on this who have a similar perspective with Dr. Schulman. I'd ask you not to be redundant to his testimony, to be supplemental to his testimony, so we can get through the several people that want to be heard on this bill and the several bills that we still haven't heard yet. So be respectful of our time also. I know that a lot of you sacrifice a lot of time and you want to be complete in your testimony, but make it complete, please, with the idea of what's already been presented and without being redundant. So with that said, Dr. Andriotis, is that?
Oh, that was the letter also.
Okay. Dr. Lancelotti? Dr. Ford? Dr. Ford? Yeah.
Hi, good afternoon. I appreciate your giving me the ability to testify today. My name is Dr. Glenn Fort. I am board certified in infectious diseases. I took the test in 1990. I recertified in 2000. I recertified in 2010, and I'm due to recertify in 2020. I'm also the Chief Medical Officer for Landmark Medical Center, so I'm in charge of overseeing the medical staff office for the credentialing of physicians, nurse practitioners, and physician assistants. And I will mention to you that nurse practitioners and physician assistants do not have to undergo any of this that we have to do as physicians. One of the things I want to bring up to you is why this concept of maintenance of certification. Why did this happen? It didn't really happen until the late 1980s and early 1990s. Before that, we were grandfathered in. I'm actually grandfathered in for internal medicine, but not for infectious diseases. I think the American Board of Medical Societies specialties thought that maybe because physicians weren't going back to medical school or going to courses or attending seminars that they may not be current on medical information. But what the American Board of Medical Specialties could not foresee was the invention of the internet. Because the internet now offers a tremendous opportunity for continuing medical education in a concise and practical way. Often the courses or webinars are actually sponsored by medical schools and medical societies and medical journals themselves. But a lot of these are not sponsored by the American Board of Specialties. So they want us to go to their courses, they want us to go to their sponsored activities, and they've set up more complicated process to get maintenance and certification than we really need to. And so I think it's very important that we adopt the AML bill that decouples how physicians are licensed and credentialed. Is that important? Yes. In my medical staff office, we are now debating, should we require maintenance and certification for our physicians? Our big fear is that insurance companies will say, well, if you're not in mock, we're not going to give you privileges, you can't see our patients. And insurance companies are already telling us, oh, you spend too much money on blood tests, you can't see our patients anymore. So our concern is if I decouple that in my hospital, then Blue Cross, United Health can say, well, if you're not in mock, we're not going to let you see our patients. So that's why it's important that we have the protection from the state through this AMA bill to protect ourselves and our hospital medical staff so that our physicians don't lose the ability to see a panel of patients from an insurance company. 10 states have already adopted this. 15 states are looking at this. States like California, Texas, they've already adopted this. So this is not a new concept. This is just a new concept for here in Rhode Island. Brown Medical School, when it opened up its new campus 4 years ago, they deliberately did not include a single book in their medical library. Everything is on the internet. The reality is today, on my phone, I have more medical information than I ever had in the 1980s going into a medical library or opening up a big textbook. And so it's time to enter into the 21st century with new technologies, and we don't need this maintenance and certification as it is adopted now by the American Board of Medical Specialties. Thank you.
Question from Senator Satchel.
Thank you, Doctor. Did you say in your testimony that your hospital was thinking?
We are in the process of reevaluating this, and we're waiting to see if this bill gets approved or not.
Okay, so a follow-up, if I may, Mr. Chair. My question to you is similar to what I asked Dr. Silva. I had said that it seemed that there were a lot of letters and testimony from psychiatrists. And I also noticed in some of the surveys that were given, and it appeared that a majority of the doctors that filled out these surveys work at Landmark.
Yes.
Is that because the hospital is thinking about?
Because I am the chief medical officer and I am pushing this as well. I don't think this is necessary. They have done surveys of doctors in the state, and 85% of physicians in this state do not believe we need mock as a reason for licensure or being able to see panels of patients from any insurance company.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So you're the chief medical officer at Landmark.
Yes.
And most of the people, you can correct me, as we all ask people as they go along, but as Senator Satchel said, a lot of the testimony we have is from doctors who have privileges at Landmark.
Right, because when we brought this up as a medical staff,
Yeah. So
They
I want to
also-
know,
they
because the
agreed to
way,
help us.
Yeah, how, the way the legislation is written is that it prevents somebody from being denied privileges solely on
correct.
MOC.
Right now, our medical staff bylaws say
Yeah.
you must become recertified every 10 years.
So do you have an incident that you're aware of where somebody has been denied privileges solely based on their MOC?
Right now, we have several physicians who have not been recertified through the mock process,
Right.
and we are debating, waiting to see what happens with this legislation.
Whether or not they will be continued to have
Correct.
privileges? Okay.
As it's mentioned before, hospital medical staffs are independent, but if I take away the privileges of a physician on my medical staff,
Yeah.
you can be assured that the insurance companies will bounce all over this and say, we're going to take away your privileges to see any of our patients in our insurance, because you've been kicked out of a medical staff in this state. And that's why we have to be so careful, because if I tell a physician, you can't have privileges anymore in my hospital, that's something they have to report to the Board of Health and to the insurance companies. And I don't want that to be a reason that insurance companies can then deny physicians access to their own patients.
So getting down to the language of the legislation is that somebody can't be denied solely on the MOC or their participation.
Correct.
You have bylaws that
Well, our bylaws require
covering
physicians to have CME, continuing medical education, 40 hours as required by the health department.
So is there a process within your bylaws where you could add waivers that said it's under our discretion and we can waiver based on this? So
Yes, and
can
we
this
are, we will
this
be
can
considering
governed-
those.
So there's nothing currently that would interfere with a hospital's governing body, including you as the chief medical officer, in proposing and implementing in your bylaws that exactly what this legislation aims to do could be done within your bylaws.
We want the backing of legislation because, again, the concern is
There's
that...
nothing currently that would
No.
prevent that. Okay,
No.
thank you.
But if we do that, we're concerned that insurance panels and other hospitals may deny them privileges because they don't agree and they want them to be certified.
Do you have
through the
any
MOCA.
history of that, where that would be a concern? Where
No, because up
insurance-
to now, we have required the mock
It's just
certification.
potential, you're worried about the potential.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Senator Sheehan.
Question. Could you also put in your bylaws requiring at your hospital equal pay for equal work for women?
We do not have that bylaw currently.
But could you do that?
Yes, we could.
Okay. So any organization could probably do that, any
Correct.
corporation. But obviously, that's something that the legislature is getting involved with, because we don't want it to be necessarily one-off organization doing it, but we think it's good policy. And in this case, we're trying to protect doctors and physicians from being compelled, unless they lose their privileges, from having to go through this really involved, comprehensive, expensive maintenance certification. Would you agree with that?
I agree. I'm in the process now doing it. So every year, I have to do a take-home book, I have to answer questions, I have to do surveys, and I'm planning to take the test in 2020, but if it's not required, then I won't take it either.
Do you think those tests are making you a better doctor?
I do not think they're improving my patient care.
And do you think the requirements currently required by the state of Rhode Island do make you a good doctor?
The state of Rhode Island
along with your
requires me
practice?
to attend 40 hours of lectures, and the state of Rhode Island imposes certain aspects of those lectures. So now they say we need 8 hours of opioid prescription. I have to undergo those 8. They say I need to have lectures on bloodborne pathogens. I have to go to those lectures. So the health department is already telling physicians what we think you should have as part of your continuing education. What we don't need is a separate organization to say you need to take these take-home booklets, you need to do these surveys, and then you must sit down for a test every 10 years.
Right.
That should be
That's
optional.
not very democratic and independent
No, that should be
corporation
optional.
dictating those terms to all physicians.
Correct.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions? So before we go to the next witness, we have people coming and going to other committees, so I want to do a motion to hold for further study 2408 We already did 2546. We didn't do 2410 yet. 2547, 2551, 2552, 2553, 2673. All those in favor? So all the bills that we currently have listed for hearing have been held for further study so that to enable members to come and go to other committees that they have. Dr. Stern, I think it is. I'm not sure I'm reading that right. What? Stein? Can't hear you, but that's okay.
On her way.
Oh, she's on her way? Okay. Debbie McIntyre?
Thank you. Went down to Sunday Hook.
Honorable Chairman and distinguished members of the committee, thank you so much for hearing all of the testimony. We have a lot of physicians who are very, very concerned, and we'll try to keep it brief, but we also want you to understand that this is a serious problem for us, and that's why we're here. There's a significant shortage of physicians nationwide and in Rhode Island. My name is Dr. Debbie McIntyre. I am a psychiatrist. I have been working in Rhode Island for 22 years. I have been board certified twice. I am the president of an organization of physicians who is very concerned about keeping doctors working here in Rhode Island called the Rhode Island Physicians for Quality Care. One of the concerns that we have is this maintenance of certification, and we got involved because we found out that every one of us wants to drop certifications, everyone is trying to retire early, and everyone is saying that this is a ridiculous requirement from an outside organization, and we don't think that that's correct. I attended Brown residency program, and I made Rhode Island my home, and I would like to stay here. But if Massachusetts decides to pass a law that doesn't require this, me and a bunch of my younger physician friends are going to be joining up with Massachusetts because we think that this program is not an appropriate way to practice medicine. The American Board of Medical Specialties, you will soon meet Mr. Sheffield, who is part of this. The American Board of Medical Specialties has required this this maintenance of certification program. It used to be completely voluntary, but in practice it's becoming increasingly involuntary, as you note. They are being sued right now for antitrust because...
So Deb, you just said it's required. Can you give us an example of where it's required?
So it's required by many of the hospitals.
In Rhode Island?
In Rhode Island, and it's being required increasingly for insurance panels. And it's being required in other states, which is why that there are 26 states who are trying to pass some sort of legislation, 11 who have passed legislation, and 3 who have passed similar legislation. If you look, this purple thing, it sort of outlines all the different states who are trying to pass legislation, and it is kind of clarifies which ones are, the P is proposed, the X has passed, and it kind of tells you which part of the MOC is required, is being excluded. So they're trying to keep it out of, they're following the AMA policy, which says it shouldn't be linked to licensure, to hospital privileges, or to insurance panels. And various states have different degrees of being able to pass that. And we think that it's an important thing to pass here as well. It's a very time-consuming thing, and as Dr. Shulman noted, it's constantly changing, which is why nobody can give you an answer. So they've changed life psychiatry requirements probably 10 times in the last 3 years. And it's been changed in part because there are national groups of doctors who are forming alternative boards, who are forming alternative organizations to the AAMA, because we, as physicians, want to keep practicing. We've spent at least 24 years of our life in school, and we like learning, but we don't want to to buy a program from a different company that's based in Illinois to be able to practice medicine. I went to Brown, I went to Rice, some of my colleagues went to Harvard, but I can't even take a Harvard course that will count as some of the self-assessment requirements because they're not preferred partners, they're not preferred providers, they're not on the same link, they didn't pay the right money, or I don't even know how they get on, but they're not preferred. So this is a serious problem when one monopoly, one single agency has this much control over the ability to practice medicine, and you have this many doctors who are against it. So we have over 350 physician signatures from Rhode Island who are against this program and are against this being tied to our ability to practice medicine. This is almost half of what is in the actual Rhode Island Medical Society. There's only 750 members of the Rhode Island Medical Society, and so that accounts for about 15% of physicians in the state. We represent at least 85% of the physicians who are opposed to this, which is 85% of Rhode Island physicians. So, which matches up with national surveys. So we did our own survey. We sent it out to 1,000 physicians in different specialties, and inpatient and outpatient. And it came back, if you look at this, one of the little flyers has some green on it. I hope that you got it. So what we found is that 67% of Rhode Island physicians that were surveyed that responded were considering retiring early, dropping their certifications, or moving to another state because of MOC. We found that 92% are in favor of a legislation similar to this and to the efforts of the AMA to propose to make sure that the MOC does not get linked to licensure, hospital privileges, or insurance panels. And that 92% think that it would be 84% are against a law requiring board certification and MOC required through a form of licensure like the compact. 81% of Rhode Island physicians would consider moving to Massachusetts if their MOC requirements were eliminated in Massachusetts. So Massachusetts is trying to pass their law, and we think that the way to keep doctors practicing here, because it's not far, I don't mind driving. I'm from Texas originally, but I don't mind driving. And I would drive because this company shouldn't be allowed to one single agency that is costing doctors thousands of dollars. So there's some estimates that with all the time that's required and all the modules that you have to buy and the testing, that it costs between $10,000 and $40,000 depending on how many specialties you have to upkeep. That's a huge burden. And if you don't do that, then you are not listed as maintenance of certified, and then you can't practice medicine in that hospital setting. And as Dr. Mercer said, as Dr. Fort said, there's a concern that then the hospital, they can't work anywhere. Because if they get dropped from their hospital privileges, then that's a problem.
Are there any currently states in the Northeast that have passed this legislation or
So
similar legislation?
Maine has passed, it keeps it from requiring it for licensure. New Hampshire is trying, Massachusetts is trying, New York is trying, New Jersey is trying, Maryland has passed some sort of legislation, Florida is trying, California is trying, Texas, which has 50,000 physicians compared to 4,000.
So currently, if you stop practicing in Rhode Island because of this and went to Massachusetts, until they pass the law, there's no difference.
There's no difference at this time. That's correct. But when they pass it, they're a medical society, so they represent, 30,000 doctors, are in favor of a legislation.
Speculative whether we'll pass it or they'll pass it or another New England state will pass it.
All I'm saying is that it's a concern and that we should be aware of that.
Okay.
And we're trying to let you know, kind of the Horton here's the who thing, that there is a problem and we need to fix it.
Yeah.
Because there's no way that I could get this many doctors
Almost
to show
every
up.
day, I'm just getting to the point where almost every day there's a bill in the state legislature where somebody comes up and testifies and threatens to move to Massachusetts or Connecticut unless we pass the bill.
Sure, I'm not suggesting that you do it just because they're going to do it. All I'm suggesting is that there are a bunch of doctors who are willing to drop their certifications or move somewhere else.
Right.
And I did a survey. We did a survey of a bunch of doctors just so that you will know that.
Yeah.
There are a lot of
every day we have somebody who's going to buy their liquor or their gasoline or stop,
Sure.
won't send their truck to Rhode Island or
So, I'm not, this is not an idle threat. We love practicing here. We want to stay here. We love it. We don't like this company.
Okay. Senator Sheehan?
Yeah, I just thinking you could respond to this statement, Dr. McIntyre. We should not allow one company to have the monopolistic control over so many docks in any state, let alone nationally. Would you agree with that?
I totally agree with that. How can it be one company when you have Harvard, you have Yale, you have Brown, you have all these organizations that train physicians? And how can we have one organization that keeps you from, it's like a bottleneck. It's like one bottleneck.
Whether or not doctors burn out because of this process, the mock, whether they decide not to practice any longer or they decide to leave the state, that's certainly consequential if it were to happen. But would you say that or agree that this would be good policy to protect our physicians from having to jump through a hoop of swords every so many years and pay a high price for that, a process that doesn't improve their practice just for the sake of one company being able to claim the privilege of giving them maintenance certification rights?
I have to agree with that. There's several different layers of who practices medicine in Rhode Island. And if you look at one of these flyers, you will notice the difference in comparison the three different groups. So there's physician assistants, there's nurse practitioners, and then there's physicians. Physicians have at least 6 years, 5 to 6 years longer of training and more like national tests that we have to do. And then we're then required to jump through even more hoops. As Dr. Fort mentioned, the nurse practitioners that are working in our hospital are not required to do this maintenance of certification. The physicians who have grandfathered out don't have to do it. It's only the younger physicians who are being affected, and this is a nationwide problem. And why is it that one company should have that ability to practice when we have a shortage? How easy is it for you to get a physician appointment?
And one last question, Mr. Chairman. Do you think, would this legislation, if enacted into law, prevent people who really want to do the extra work and buy the modules and go through those hoops? Would it prevent them from doing it because that wouldn't be fair to them, or would it just protect doctors who don't wish to go through the process?
Well, if we passed a law that said that, that AT&T couldn't be the only phone company, then that would allow Sprint and Verizon and all these other agencies to come in. So AT&T used to be a monopoly.
The government actually did that. They broke up Bell.
Right. So it used to be a monopoly, and then it broke it up, and then we now have like cell phones that are amazing.
Thank you. Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Calkin?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to make sure that I heard something right. Did you say that doctors have to get this MOC for each specialty that they do, or is it just once?
So every physician, it's not required for licensure, for one thing, which is good, and it's supposed to be a voluntary process. So, for example, as a psychiatrist, I completed 4 years of undergraduate, 4 years of medical school, and 4 years of residency training with an 80-hour work week. And I then decided that I wanted to be board certified. And at that time, it was like, oh, I'm board certified. And so I studied for several months. I took the test. And at the time, it felt like, finishing a PhD or completing a bar. It was something that you completed once, and it was done. And so I'm working alongside all of my physician colleagues who have been grandfathered. I'm working alongside nurse practitioners who don't have the same programs or requirements for training. And then I get a call I get a certified letter from one of the hospitals that I was working for saying that if I don't take the test in a month, then I can't work at that hospital anymore. And I had just had a baby. I had never had any problems. I'm actually supervising some of the nurse practitioners. They're actually sending patients who are very complicated to me. I'm working beside other psychiatrists who are grandfathered out of this process, and they look at me like, what do you have to do? I'm like, if I don't sit for this test. And
I guess I understand what you're saying, but getting back to my question, like in your practice, do you certify in a couple of different things, like in your specialties that require you to have this MOC for this particular specialty, this particular?
It's a little confusing, because initially the board certification was one thing. It was like just doing the bar or doing a PhD or completing your BA or MS or whatever it is. But then this company at some point decided that they wanted to change the rules. So they changed it to every 10 years. So you had to sit for the test every 10 years. So for me, I only did psychiatry. I only did general adult psychiatry. If I wanted to do a child, then I'd have to do another fellowship, and then I'd have to do another certification. If I wanted to do then substance abuse, then I would have to do that and then sit for another certification. That's really what I was asking about. Okay. But some of these physicians have 4 or more certifications and have spent much more time in school than 24 years, which I thought was a lot. And they are dropping their certifications that they had to spend more time studying and doing 2-year trainings to be able to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Just clarification, Mr. Chair. So generally speaking, how often do you have to go through this mock process to maintain your specialty?
So one of the things that has happened is that it used to be a 10-year program, and then when I sit for the test again, it turned out that it had to be a 3-year program. And now one of my colleagues just completed it, and now it's a 1-year program. So it's been changing all the time. And so, my husband is actually an anesthesiologist, and he has to complete some online testing question things. And if he doesn't even answer one single question, then he is no longer MOC compliant, and then he can potentially get kicked off of the hospital panel. So one question every year, if he somehow misses it or doesn't take it or whatever, then he can be not compliant and be kicked off the panels, and then he can't work. It's at least one. It's becoming every 1 year now, but it's been changing because they want you to prepay for this test in 10 years. Like, oh well, maybe we don't have to do that. We're going to change it again. We're going to change it again. It's hard to keep up. If you actually look on the website, all my colleagues we have no idea what we're supposed to be doing because it's so confusing. I don't even know. So we're all like, I give up. And in addition to the fact that to take one of those big tests, it's esoteric tests. It's a 200 multiple choice question. So it can come from anywhere, anything, and it's kind of like your worst nightmare. It's like, I don't know if you ever had those nightmares where you think you wake up in the middle of the night.
So I just have one other question. We asked Dr. Ford, he's Chief Medical Officer at Landmark. You're currently practicing out of Landmark or elsewhere?
So I have privileges at Landmark, Lospan, and Care New England.
Okay.
But I am at Landmark, so I am talking this up with everybody who's around me. But there's other physicians.
No, I'm
who
just
are
trying to
at
keep
hospitals.
track as we go through the doctors that are testifying and where they're practicing from.
Sure. So I have privileges at 3 hospital networks.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
And thanks for passing the mental health bills.
Yep. Dr. Adam Kipler, do I have that right? Kipfler. Is Dr. Kipfler here? What? Okay, Thomas, he's a dentist, or osteopath. Thomas Pomado? Okay. Ishan Mirza?
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the committee, thank you for having me over here. My name is Ahsan Mirza, and I am here representing my opinions on the anti-mock legislature. I'm in favor of this legislation.
So let's get this out of the way right away, just so we know you practice what.
Oh yeah.
What's your practice?
So I'm the chief of medicine at Kent Hospital.
Okay.
I have board certification. At least I gave the examination for internal medicine,
Okay.
nephrology, hypertension, and critical care medicine. I can only practice critical care because I could not afford financially, mentally, emotionally to maintain the other 3 of the boards. So technically, I'm only an intensivist. Everything else doesn't matter.
Well, let me go through that because we talked about the governing bodies and the ability for them to waiver. So have they told you that you can't practice because you don't have MLC in those? Are you assuming?
Well, I cannot practice as a director of a nephrology unit because I have to be maintained certified nephrologist.
So does Care New England or Kent Hospital, have they told you that? Have they made a determination?
As an outpatient nephrology centers, you cannot be the director of a nephrology dialysis center if you're not board certified.
Okay.
You can't be. So, I cannot put myself as specialist of hypertension or a special of internal medicine because I don't have that certification because I chose to let go of my certification. But I did have to do the MOC for critical care because I wanted to maintain.
But Dr. Ford, I just want to get this right because Dr. Ford said that they had the ability to waiver at Landmark, so they don't have the ability to waiver. They've rejected you solely on your MLC?
No, I did not even give them a chance to reject me. I am just doing critical care because I cannot do anything else. And I know if I were to apply for critical care privileges without maintaining a critical care certification, it will be a problem. It won't be just a problem for medical staff. The insurance companies will have a problem. It's going to be one-off, and I don't think the hospital staff or bylaws will just give exception to one person and not do it to everybody else. So the issue, I'm going to read a paragraph from how this private organization is infiltrating the politics of this. I'm going to read one line of the compact bill, which is section 2, number 11, line number 11, as the definition of a physician. So if I don't pass through these lines, I'm not a physician regardless of my 20-some years of training. And that states that I have to be from an accredited medical school, 2, accredited residency program, 3, maintain my certification, time limited. That means that if I don't have time-limited certification, according to the compact bill, I'm not a physician anymore. So therefore, I can't practice. This is how these people are infiltrating the legislation and political agenda. So if I don't maintain my certification, I'm out. Now, over here it was asked that what is it there you get for certification? If I do Harvard Medical School's CME program for 100 hours, it will not be counted for this mock because it's not their kind of an examination. So it is not based on my expertise, it's not based on my knowledge, it's based on only what they tell you, what their exam is, what their questions is. I could go to Yale, Harvard, Johns Hopkins, wherever, and be certified from their CMEs, but it would not matter to the MOC people. And this is a travesty. And according to the Association of American Medical Colleges, this came out last year, there will be a shortage of 110,000 physicians in this country, 110,000 physicians in 12 years. If we don't protect our physicians here, we go out. This state cannot afford to hire new physicians. And the physicians who are already practicing are not maintaining the certification. We will have a shortage of physicians, your family's physicians, my physicians. It is going to happen, and it is up to the leadership here to make sure that we are protected. Currently, a private enterprise is dictating how we practice here. They're getting hundreds of millions of dollars in their bank account, and they're not allowing us to do what we do best, is take care of patients. Thank you.
Any questions? Thank you very much. Senator Sheehan?
Could Kent Hospital put it, through their bylaws to say that we won't require the mock for our physicians? Could they do that?
They have to be given a guarantee that the insurance companies won't block them.
So as long as the insurance companies don't wrestle them to do it, so they can do it individually.
They could.
Do you think it's better policy policy, though, to have a state law that protects all doctors, so that they're not kind of forced to do this by any entity, whether it's a hospital association or an insurance company? You think that's a better approach?
Well, if the state protects us, then we can do the things that, in my opinion, are the right things to do to make sure. We have one physician who left Kent Hospital, went to join somewhere else because she could not maintain her certification. It just happened last year.
And unlike this corporation that runs the mock, doctors can't unionize and kind of act as a counterweight.
No, we can't unionize. We cannot unionize.
Asymmetrical warfare there.
Totally. Totally. So you are going to protect us. We can't protect ourselves.
Actually, a question of the sponsor. I keep hearing the insurance companies, and the insurance companies. Have they weighed in on this legislation at all to you?
I have not heard any from insurance companies. They can testify now for or against to my knowledge.
Okay, thank you.
So you also referenced insurance companies. Do you have examples of insurance companies denying based on their MOC?
I personally don't because I work for the hospital, but I know a lot of my friends who are outpatient primary care physicians who cannot join a panel of insurance companies if they do not maintain certification.
But are they reimbursed? They're still reimbursed.
At a lower pace at best.
Yeah.
But best is, worst case scenario is that they can purely refuse.
Is there any, do you have any examples from yourself or other physicians that are being reimbursed on a different rate based, because that's what the legislation goes towards?
Currently at this...
different rate based on whether they've gone through MOC or not?
At this point in time, my hospital requires everybody to be certified.
Yeah.
So if a physician is not certified, they cannot work at the hospital. So that issue is not coming up. And the reason why they cannot continue to work is because they cannot be reimbursed and bills cannot be collected.
Can we, any other questions? Okay.
So we had a previous witness say that technically, splitting hairs wise, whatever, certification, maintenance certification is not required anywhere in the state of Rhode Island. Is that true? Okay. Could you have privileges at Kent Hospital without maintenance certification?
No, I will not.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Thank you. So I think I've gotten to everybody on the list, and if I missed anybody, please let me know. I missed anybody? What?
Jeffrey Whitaker and Dr. Stein.
Okay. Whoever had, I thought I've gone through everybody, but if I haven't, come up.
Thank you.
And let's try to,
Mr.
I said after the first very comprehensive testimony to try to avoid the redundancy, so I'm going to ask you the same thing.
Okay.
So we can get the other bills that we have on.
I will. My name is Jeffrey Whitaker. I'm Secretary for Rhode Island Physicians for Quality Care.
Yeah.
Also a client of Physicians in Rhode Island.
Yeah.
In the last 20 years, I've had to switch 3 physicians. One of them stopped working completely. I have a letter from the American Psychiatric Association in support of this, with almost 39,000 psychiatric doctors around the country. I'll pass that out. Today I want to talk about the cost of this. I've done extensive research with various videos around the country of doctors testifying. And in addition to the cost of about $1,800 for some of these tests, study materials, $700, review materials, $1,200, travel, $200, lodging and food, $1,200, lost practice revenue, $9,200, practice lost studying, $4,600, staff time, $425, for a total of $19,000. And this was a doctor in Texas that was a single practice, and she was a pediatric doctor. And it has a huge toll on doctors practicing and be able to provide that care. And one of the doctors talked about the study materials. It took her a lot to actually get her patients to fill out the materials and the education for the staff to learn how to do the materials properly. So there are a lot of additional costs in addition to the cost of the separate boards associated with the mock as well. Okay.
Thank you.
Just,
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, just another question on cost. You went to the monetary cost. Is there an emotional cost that was referenced in a previous witness?
She did mention emotional costs. She had to spend time away from family, giving up vacations and other things with a growing family. So that was a huge cost with her.
Yeah, I see physicians as some of the number of professions that are out there that are the glue in society that try to keep the choo-choo on the tracks and keep society moving forward and take care of other people. It'd be a shame if we lose some of them.
Oh, absolutely. And last year I was hit in a head-on collision, and fortunately Rhode Island Hospital and Kent Hospital and South County took care of me fantastically. But my doctors were just amazing. They called me at home to see how I was doing and had excellent care. So we have great doctors in the state, and I just hope we keep them.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Where would you? Oh, you have now? Okay. No, this is a different one. Thank you.
Yep. Anybody else who was skipped?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Good evening. My name's Dr. Achina Stein. I am presently in private practice in East Providence, Rhode Island. I've been in Rhode Island since the year of 2000. I've been the medical director at East Bay Medical Center from 2004 to 2011. And I decided I've taken the board exam 3 times, 1996, 2006, and 2016. So the next time that I'm supposed to take this exam is in 2026. I did things a little bit differently, which is why I left Rhode Island temporarily to go to Massachusetts and join an emerging field called functional medicine.
Called what?
Functional medicine.
Okay.
So the reason I did that is because there's people who have chronic illnesses that aren't getting better, and it's a different method of treating people to help them achieve health. And I purposely went into this training, and I spent $18,000 and 2.5 years of extra training to obtain this certification. There is no board certification for this, so I am maintaining my board certification in psychiatry in order for me to practice. It's something that I've decided to spend my own money doing, and because I believe it's important in terms of bringing that kind of medicine to Rhode Island. I'm one of 3 practitioners in this state. So in the process, I've also had to stop everything in making this change in training, and I took a huge salary cut on purpose because I really believe in this type of medicine. But I had to stop in the process of it to get my board certification in psychiatry, and plunked down about $2,500 just to be able to take this test, just to say I'm board certified. And it was a complete waste of my money and time. And it was something that didn't really help me in any way. It didn't improve my level of education in any way. In fact, there were questions on there that were on previous exams that were completely useless, like what chromosome is Klinefelter syndrome on, which is something that I can ask Siri if I really wanted to know. So I'm telling you this because I want you to understand is that I think doctors are always learning and wanting to learn in the areas of medicine that they feel are important for their patients. And I've chosen to do that and spent 4 times more money and more time in pursuing that to help the patients, my patients and people in Rhode Island. And in contrast, I spent money that I wish I didn't have to spend and time that was completely useless. So that's basically my 2 cents. That's it. Thanks.
Any questions? Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Anybody else? Mr. Sheffield?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of committee. My name is Charlie Sheffield. I am with the American Board of Medical Specialties. I know that we are getting late in the hour, so I will keep my comments to those that I think are going to be most relevant to this conversation. And special thank you to Senator Sheehan for the warm welcome earlier to the friendly confines of the Chicago. Correct, sir. Yeah. Thank you very much. I appreciate the warm welcome to the friendly confines of Ocean State politics. I would like to just maybe cut through some of the hyperbole we've heard before and reframe the conversation about what it is we're actually talking about with this bill. And what we're talking about with this bill affects the standards to which Rhode Island specialty physicians are held. The bill actively pursues a diminishment of the level of standards and the accountability that we have for specialty physicians that are certified under one of ABMS's 24 member boards. That's important, an important distinction. ABMS is the umbrella organization for 24 separate member boards that all administer a different iteration of the maintenance of certification program based on their own specialty. So neurologists are receiving a different type of test than our allergists, than our OBGYNs.
So you don't write the tests. The separate 24 specialties and their oversight boards write the tests?
Yes, sir. In concert with practicing specialty physicians, they develop these tests and standards. Okay. And we believe that there should be a higher level of accountability for those physicians who want to hold them out as specialty physicians. It's absolutely correct that initially there was an initial certification that lasted for a lifetime. But in the late 80s and 90s, many of our boards took a step back, saw the pace and scope at which specialty medicine was advancing, and realized that a one-time test is not sufficient to keep specialists apprised of medical advancements at the rate that they're coming through now. So rather than have a specialist take an initial exam once and have that be good forever, we have now asked them, or our member boards have asked them, to sit periodically for a reassessment of their clinical knowledge every 6 to 8 years, sometimes since absolutely in flux, depending on which specialty board you're talking about. The reason that we can't give you a single answer about what that is because they are in flux currently, because we are responding to physician concerns about the relevancy of the test and the burden of the test. What I can tell you is that after conducting a pretty thorough study of our own member boards, the highest annuity for member dues and participation in member board of all of our member boards is $600 a year, which is about half the cost of your average cell phone bill on an annual basis. That's the high end. There are many boards that offer their member dues are much lower. Where I think that we're hearing some of these numbers, these bigger numbers thrown out, are some of the extrapolations of the cost of travel, time preparing for it, time away from practice. One of the things that is changing currently with the maintenance certification programs across all boards is that they're becoming more user-friendly and accessible. So, back in the 70s when there was no internet, you absolutely did have to fly to a remote testing facility, and that did cost more. But with the advent of technology and the internet, we've changed our tests so that physicians can take their exams or assessments on a modular basis from the comfort of their own home or office, and we're greatly reducing the time cost and fiscal cost of sitting for these periodic reassessments, again every 6 to 8 to 10 years, depending on which member board you're talking about. Just to be clear, if it hasn't been already, ABMS is opposed to the bill because we see it as diminishing the quality of care and accountability of specialty physicians in the state of Rhode Island. I'd like to talk a little bit about, address a few inaccuracies in previous testimony with all due respect. The first is that we've heard repeatedly that MOC offers no value to patients or specialty physicians. In fact, we've got dozens of independent studies that indicate that patients who receive care from an MOC physician perform better, they have higher outcomes, lower readmissions, lower follow-up visits, and receive better care. We'd love to. We have got a consultant on the ground in Mr. Chris Vitale, and we'll make sure that those are communicated to you through him. The second is that ABMS determines who gets to practice medicine in a state. That's absolutely not true either. In Rhode Island, it's called the Board of Medical Licensure and Discipline. It's an independent state agency that sets the bare minimum of qualifications for a physician to practice and see patients in the state. We have absolutely no relationship to any state's Board of Medicine. They set those standards and give approval on which physicians are licensed to practice medicine. ABMS and its member boards create a set of standards that take those physicians one step above and beyond those baseline standards and say, this is what it takes to be a specialty physician. There are roughly 3,500 specialty physicians in the state of Rhode Island. There's over 5,000 physicians who are licensed to practice medicine. That's about a 71% breakdown of physicians who have some type of specialty certification from an ABMS member board. That also means that there's 30% of physicians out in Rhode Island today who are seeing and treating patients with no relationship to an ABMS member board and no specialty certification. You can absolutely see and treat patients today in Rhode Island with or without a specialty certification from ABMS. I'd like to talk a little bit about there's been mentions of this bill being passed in a number of other states. There are many states that have passed a bill that says a state board of medicine cannot require a specialty certification for initial licensure. That is a position we long have supported. Frankly, it does nothing to change current practice in any 50 states. A number of states have felt compelled to pass some type of legislation anyways. We've stood aside on those bills because we don't have any issue with any physician who wants to appeal to their state board of medicine to practice medicine. Texas has passed a bill that requires that when a hospital is deciding to use maintenance and certification as one of their requirements for quality criteria for their physicians, that their medical staff on the hospital board is more involved in those conversations. To be perfectly candid, Tennessee is poised to pass something very similar this year. It hasn't yet passed. But at the end of this legislative session, that will be 2 states that have basically passed a law that said they would like hospitals need to solicit more input from their medical staff before making these determinations. No state has passed any kind of prohibition on the use, outright prohibition on physician participation in maintenance and certification. We're very proud of that, and we believe that's going to be the trend that continues, because once we start to have conversations with legislators, they start to realize, and once we're able to develop show them the evidence of how patients improve under MOC programs, people understand that holding specialty physicians to a higher standard and a higher level of accountability is good for the patient. It certainly, we all are in professions where there's administrative burdens. There's all sorts of licensing fees that we all pay that we wish we wouldn't. But we're talking about specialized medicine. We're talking about brain surgery. We're talking about cutting people open. And we need to make sure that the people who hold themselves out as being capable of doing that are able to do that. And we think taking a test maybe 20, 30, 40 years in the past is no longer a sufficient test of whether or not you're capable of treating physicians today. There absolutely is an issue with our grandfathers. In the late 80s or early 90s, our board started to change how we reassessed our physicians, but frankly, there was a legal obligation to the physicians who'd already come through our program, and we had to honor that contract, and that was a time-unlimited contract. Every physician now, though, who comes through these tests does sit for reassessments, and that will be our policy moving forward. Last, I would just mention finally that I'd reiterate the fact that there are valid concerns with MOC, and we will freely admit that. And because of that, all of our 24 member boards are in the process of implementing changes or currently examining what changes need to be made in order to make these tests less burdensome and more accessible to physicians, while also maintaining a very high threshold of excellence that the patients and physician employers like hospitals come to expect of someone who holds out an ABMS specialty certificate as the gold standard of excellence, and we're very proud of that. With that, I think that those covered the major bases. I'm sure there was a lot of there were previous questions and testimony that alluded to that suggested that I might be able to address those. So I'll stop there and open myself up to any questions.
Any questions? Senator Crowley.
Does it take 90 hours to complete this test?
So there are 24 different member boards. I can't speak specifically to each one. Some of them certainly do take a number of hours. I've not seen anything that says up to 90 hours. And again, we have to remember that I think what we're talking about in those very large numbers is all the preparation, the study, everything that goes into one of those 6, 8, 10-year cycles.
One more question, Mr. Chairman. Do state boards of licensure require the MOC?
Absolutely none of them do, and our position has always been that they shouldn't.
If I might just follow up on that. Do they require some kind of certification? Do they have to go before a board as a doctor just to get their license every so many years or whatever?
I would encourage you to talk to the Rhode Island Medical Licensure and Discipline Board, but they would have some type of thing that you'd have to have a medical degree from an accredited university, potentially participate in some type of residency before you're kind of granted that license.
Right, so I've been through, and I'm not a doctor, but if I were the doctor, I've been through 4 years of college, 4 years of internship, 4 years of residency, and if in that residency I am going to specialize, I probably would do another 2 or 3 years just to hone in on that. Why the need for more testing?
In the example that you gave, there is none. If you want to be a general practitioner and you've satisfied the bare minimum set by the independent state agency for you to treat patients and practice medicine in the state, that should be enough. That's determined by an independent state agency in making sure that patients are protected. But we as a private organization, and a nonprofit one I should mention, but we as a certifying body for specialty physicians, we say you do need additional requirements before you can hold yourself out to be reimbursed from a health plan, get a job at a hospital as a brain surgeon or an allergist or a neurologist. You have to demonstrate skills and knowledge that go beyond the basic requirements for practicing general medicine in the state.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Sheehan.
Mr. Chairman, I do have some questions here because this is the first witness I've been able to ask questions of from the other side of the fence. I was unfortunately called away to testify on legislation in Senate Judiciary. How do you become a state board member? I mean, I want to be a state board member here in Rhode Island. If your organization, ABMS, comes to Rhode Island in full force, how do I go about doing that? How do you become a board member of a state board as a member, as an affiliate of your national company?
So again, I'd delineate the fact that the state board, that the state, that's a state agency, that's a government agency. They will have their own requirements about what it takes for you to sit on that board. My guess is...
Of the ABMS
No, of the ABMS board. Okay, well, what it takes to be a member of an ABMS board, again, 24 different member boards. I can't speak conversantly in the nuances of each of their requirements. But I would expect them to require that you be a specialty physician who maintains their certification under ABMS rules, which would mean participation, maintenance of certification.
Do you find it in your practice, I'm sorry to interrupt,
no,
but I understood your response. Do you find in your practice just customary that maybe members of state medical associations turn out to be directors of the board in different states? Is that common practice, you think?
Typically not. If you're part of a state medical society staff, you are very busy with a number of other legislative issues. What we have done, though, recently, to solicit that type of input outside of the board's community and make sure that people who are not affiliated with ABMS do have a voice in our processes, is we've developed something called the Vision Initiative, and I'd encourage you all to go to visioninitiative.org, and that will outline a very comprehensive independent program. We've lent staff and resources to help set it up. We have no ownership over the Vision Initiative. We do have some members from our staff that help staff that. We do have representatives of ABMS on that commission because it's important to inform the conversation. But these are medical society directors. These are members of the public. These are medical directors from hospitals.
Okay, I'm not sure I totally understood, but I think I got the gist of what you said. Do you think it's fair to say that ABMS exercises near, not total, near monopolistic control, certainly to influence the various programs there may be with maintenance and certification?
I would not. There are a number of different specialty certifying organizations. ABMS is not the only one. ABMS is the most popular one. We believe that we're the most popular one because we have the most stringent standards that are recognized as having the highest threshold of quality.
How many are there, just out of curiosity, nationally? About, are we talking 10, 20, 50? How many are there maintenance certification for specialty programs in the United States? Like, how many different companies?
How many different specialty certifications? Yeah, how many different?
Yeah.
There are, if you include the osteopaths and ourselves, I know of at least 2 other certifying bodies that will give you a specialty certification.
All right.
One of them
who control approximately the similar market share?
No, absolutely not. We do have the majority of the market share.
Okay.
Again, we've been around for over 100 years and have come to be recognized as the gold standard of specialty certification.
Okay. And then last...
Can I ask a question about that?
Sure.
Yeah. So you say you have a share of the market share, but really you're a governing body for 16 specialties, right?
In its structure, yes. In the numbers, not exactly, but yes.
So those 16 specialties are probably specialties that have a lot of doctors in them.
Over 800,000 physicians across the nation have an ABMS certification.
Yeah. And many of them are critical and very interested in having continuing education of their physicians because of the trending of that specialty. Like some specialties trend very dramatically, whether it be oncology, a new drug every year, or, I'm on the overdose task force, but you guys are probably tired of hearing that, but 14 years ago, if you were subscribing pain medication, you were told that they were non-addictive. There's a real good reason to learn that they are addictive. And, so we've all been to a doctor who says, I want you to try something that's brand new, right? Or we know somebody who wants to try something that has just come on the market, or there's a practice or a surgery procedure that just came on the market. And so I don't think I need to tell anybody who's been a member of the health committee for any length of time that we've all been demonstrated that one of the reasons there is legislation every year, and one of the reasons there is changes in the medical realm every year is because it's evolving, whether it's internet or technology or lasers or chemistry or diagnoses or infectious disease. We could go on and on. But I just want everybody to understand that there are very few of us who, and I would include most of the doctors who talk to us, that don't think there should be a maintenance of their expertise in whatever specialty they're in.
Thank you for those comments, Mr. Chair, and you do raise an important point. Another huge value add of the maintenance certification program and ensuring that physicians are going to have to come back and be reassessed on current knowledge and making sure that they're up to date is that we then have the ability to press out new information. I was talking to an allergist in Virginia several months ago. She told me that, she gave me a very real world example of what you're talking about, that when she obtained her initial certification from ABMS, when an infant was exhibiting signs of a potential peanut allergy, you would essentially quarantine the child away from the peanuts during the most kind of volatile time when it was the highest risk. And that allergy was kind of allowed to progress within the infant to the point where, we all are aware of folks who can't be in a room with a peanut, or that, you can't get on an airplane that serves peanuts. When she obtained her initial certification, that was the practice. Since then, a number of studies and evidence has suggested that slowly introducing that infant to small doses of exposure of peanut dust actually helps their body fight the peanut allergy. So rather than allowing it to take hold, the body rejects this burgeoning allergy. And kids and adults are able to live lives not in fear of a peanut. That is something that she wouldn't have known if she hadn't had to come back for a test. And
That's odd because I know that information. I haven't taken the test. Anybody else know that information yet? I knew that. I'm glad.
There's another one about. Yeah, I can give you another example about Zika
though.
virus in Florida and pregnant women. There's a number of them, but the point is that MOC is not just we're moving away from this high-stakes exam that we've heard so much about. We're moving towards something that we call longitudinal assessment. That's why you see those testing periods becoming more and more frequent, because we're not simply asking you to sit down for a high-stakes exam once every 10 years. We're instead slowly feeding you information in 2 or 3 year periods to help keep you updated on what we're learning.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Just to finish, because you did ask to intervene. So no one said, and this is just a statement, that your organization prohibited doctors or physicians from practicing if they don't take the maintenance certification. It's whether or not they can maintain their certification or their privileges at a hospital that is impacted, just to be clear on that point. So the last thing I'll mention about this legislation is, you read the bill, I assume.
Yes, sir.
You came here, and I'm glad. Thank you.
I'm not sure if I have the most current copy in front of me, but I have read it and I have a copy.
So is there anything in this bill that would prohibit the free market effect of allowing hospitals then to look at somebody's resume who's applying to the hospital, to say, oh, they've got the MOC from your particular company versus another company, because you said you may have majority of the market, but there are 1 or 2 or several companies out there, to let them decide and not necessarily require that they have your particular company's MOC. That just, to me, seems like a little bit of free enterprise, a little bit of non-monopolistic type of approach to this situation. So what's wrong with that, to give options and choice? What's wrong with that?
Senator, the question is there anything in this bill that would prohibit a hospital from creating alternatives? The answer is no. The reality is there's nothing in law now that prevents them from developing alternatives.
That's not the question. What's wrong with not requiring them to say only your company can be in the business of offering mock at their hospital association? There's something wrong with that. You're answering a different question.
There's nothing wrong with that, and there's nothing that stops them from doing that today.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mike.
I just have one question, and we have a lot of legislation to move on to. But so one of the MOCs that you administer on behalf of one of the underlying organizations, I assume based on who we've heard from, is psychiatry. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes, sir.
And the other 2 or 3 organizations that help administer tests for other specialties are psychiatry. Is it redundant? Is there another organization that does psychiatry?
Well, there is another certifying body that basically requires that a physician pass our initial exam